The mansion had been silent for years. Silence so heavy that it pressed against the walls, wrapping itself around every corridor like a reminder of everything that was broken. Edward Blackwell, a self-made millionaire, had built empires, bought luxuries beyond imagination, and conquered the financial world with sheer brilliance. Yet, when it came to his own home, he lived in shadows, because silence was easier than facing the truth. That silence was broken one afternoon. Edward had returned home earlier than expected, walking into his mansion with the usual sharp echo of his shoes against marble. But as he climbed the staircase, something strange reached his ears, a sound he hadn't heard in years. Laughter. Soft, high-pitched, and full of life. For a moment, Edward froze on the steps, gripping the railing. The sound belonged to his daughter, Amelia, his 12-year-old girl who hadn't laughed like that since the accident. Since the night her car seat twisted in the wreckage, leaving her in a wheelchair with shattered bones and a spirit slowly dimming away. Edward swallowed hard. His daughter didn't laugh anymore. She rarely even smiled. Doctors could treat her body, but her soul, her spark, was fading. She barely spoke to him, avoiding his gaze, refusing therapy, and retreating into silence. And deep inside, Edward knew he had failed her. He threw money at doctors, tutors, therapists, but money couldn't heal what was broken inside. And yet, there it was. Laughter. He climbed faster, his chest tightening with hope and fear. At the top of the stairs, he followed the sound to Amelia's room. The door was slightly ajar. Edward pushed it open slowly, and the sight on the other side stopped him cold. Amelia was in her wheelchair, cheeks flushed with joy, hands lifted, as if she were floating. Beside her, twirling gracefully, was Rosa, the maid he had hired just a few months ago. But Rosa wasn't cleaning, she was dancing. With no music except Amelia's laughter, Rosa spun around, then leaned down to twirl Amelia's wheelchair in rhythm. Amelia clapped, her voice bubbling with a happiness Edward thought he'd never hear again. Edward's throat tightened. His daughter, his broken little girl, was alive again in that moment, and it wasn't because of him. It was because of Rosa. He stepped inside without meaning to, and the wooden floor creaked. The laughter stopped. Amelia's eyes darted toward him, panic flashing across her face, as if she were caught doing something wrong. Rosa straightened immediately, bowing her head, murmuring an apology. Edward swallowed. He wanted to speak, but no words came. All he could do was look at Amelia, her shining eyes, her flushed cheeks, and realize how long it had been since she looked at him that way. Finally, he found his voice. "Don't stop." Both Amelia and Rosa looked at him in surprise. Edward stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached out toward Amelia. "Don't stop." His voice cracked. "Please." Rosa glanced at Amelia, then back at him. Carefully, she nodded and placed Amelia's hand in her own. "Shall we continue, Señorita?" Amelia hesitated, then smiled, the smallest, bravest smile Edward had seen since the accident. She nodded. Rosa spun her again, and this time Edward didn't just watch. He sank into a chair at the edge of the room, his face buried in his hands, tears burning his eyes. For years, he had chased wealth and power to protect his daughter, but somewhere along the way he had forgotten the simplest truth. What she needed most wasn't money, it was joy. That night marked the beginning of change. Edward asked Rosa to stay after hours, to teach him what she was doing. At first, she seemed hesitant, unsure if the cold, intimidating millionaire was serious. But then he surprised her. He admitted, his voice raw, that he didn't know how to reach his daughter anymore. So Rosa began to guide him. Slowly, Edward learned how to laugh again. Silly games, stories, songs. He learned to dance badly, spinning Amelia's wheelchair clumsily while she laughed at his awkwardness. Every evening, they created new moments, little sparks of happiness that stitched Amelia's broken spirit back together. But challenges still came. Amelia had nights of pain, days of silence, moments when her bitterness returned. Edward stumbled often, not knowing the right words, sometimes falling back into his old habit of trying to fix things with money. But Rosa reminded him, gently, that healing was not about fixing, but about being present. And he listened. Months passed. The mansion was no longer silent. Music filled the halls. Sometimes a scratchy record Rosa found in the attic, sometimes just Edward humming off-key while Amelia giggled at him. The staff whispered in amazement about the transformation of both the girl and her father. One evening, during a small family gathering, Amelia looked at Edward with bright, determined eyes. "Daddy, will you dance with me?" Edward froze. For years, he had dreamed of a father-daughter dance, but he thought that dream had died with the accident. Now, Amelia was asking for it. He took her hands. Together, they moved, her wheelchair gliding across the floor, his steps clumsy but full of love. Rosa watched from the corner, tears streaming down her face. And in that moment, Edward realized the truth. He had built empires of stone and steel, but this fragile, imperfect dance, was his greatest masterpiece.